What's up, Internet? Welcome to Once Over. I'm Kaylee, and today Wyatt from Cinema Trip Reviews and I are going to be giving the once over to Cape Fear. There will be spoilers.
Give it a good once over.
Giving us the once over.
Giving him the once over.
Give me a once over.
Down to give us the once over.
For a routine once over.
Once over.
Oh, just once over lightly.
Wyatt, thank you so very much for joining me. I'm so excited to have you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, you and I decided to talk about Cape Fear because you and I recently talked about the director J. Lee Thompson's other movie, Happy Birthday to Me, which is extremely different than the 1962 Cape Fear. We talked about that over on your channel.
Yeah, that was a great time. Once again, thank you for joining me or talk about that movie. It's completely different. I totally forgot he directed Cape Fear whenever I was going back to rewatching this. So just kind of comparing the two, it's like night and day at that
Yes.
point. It's so strange, like the director's style between both movies.
So the 1962 Cape Fear is not only extremely different to Happy Birthday to Me, but it's also extremely different to the Martin Scorsese 1991 Cape Fear.
Yeah.
So what was kind of your introduction to Cape Fear as a film?
This is the first time I've actually seen the original. I didn't even really know there was an original until I started going back and kind of looking up into the director and reading into him when we did the Happy Birthday to Me review. I did of course, I've known about Cape Fear due to all like the references through like The Simpsons and other TV shows or other movies, especially the score that's in this movie. As soon as it came in at the beginning of the movie, it's like I instantly know this, like for
Yes.
multiple other places. But I did see the remake a long time ago. It's been a while since I've seen it. So I was definitely very intrigued to see kind of how close it resembled. This movie resembles the remake and so on and so forth. I really enjoyed the remake, actually. It's, Martin Scorsese, and then you have Robert De Niro in there, classic director, classic actor. So I was definitely interested to see how this take of it was, like how similar it was, how dark can they go with it, especially with like being a 60s film and everything like that. But loving the original. It's been a while since I've seen it, like I said. I was very interested when you asked me to do this one.
My first awareness of Cape Fear as anything was, like you just mentioned, from The Simpsons, the 1993 episode. And so I just like the first time that I saw Scorsese's Cape Fear, which is the first time that I saw Cape Fear, I just kept waiting for the HMS Pinafore score to be coming on. Like I kept expecting
Yeah.
somebody to sing that. It never happened. I was mildly disappointed. That also does not happen in the 1962 version. I don't think it needs to, though, on the plus side.
Yeah, and I do believe there was like a Seinfeld one as well. I'm not sure if
Yeah.
you're a fan of Seinfeld, but
Yes.
there's like a
Yeah.
reference in there as well where like it's I believe his uncle is like in prison. He has like a flash, like a dream of his uncle in prison, has like the tattoos on his knuckles and everything.
So, the basic story of this, of course, this is a psychological thriller, and really it's a battle between good and evil, where an attorney and his family are getting stalked by a brutal ex convict who is seeking an unjustified revenge. And I think that that term unjustified is very, very important to the plot of the 1962 film. And that changes drastically in Scorsese's version. So I do think that that's interesting. And I'll kind of talk about those changes as we go through the film itself. Of course, this movie actually was based upon a novel that came out in 1957 called The Executioners. And it stars Gregory Peck as Sam Bowden. This actually came out the same year that To Kill a Mockingbird came out, and he played Atticus Finch in that. So he was playing an attorney in two different movies the same year, and he plays it almost exactly the same.
Yeah, I mean it's been a while since I've seen To Kill a Mockingbird, but yeah, you could definitely can tell the similarities there.
And it was actually made by his production company as well. In order to get his co-star Robert Mitchum to sign on, he actually bribed him with a box of bourbon. So not just a bottle, but multiple bottles. And Mitchum finally said, "Yep, all right, I'll do it. I'm drunk. Let's go." So Mitchum is one of my favorite actors. He plays Max Cady in this. He is the villain. He is the evil of this plot. And I think that he is probably one of the best villains in cinema history, maybe along with Harvey Keitel. I particularly love Robert Mitchum in The Night of the Hunter, and I think that he just embodies that, like, disgusting, vile, vile character, and he does that in Cape Fear in spades.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I actually been meaning to watch Night of the Hunter. I actually have had it saved on my Amazon wish list for a while now because I've read about how great it is. So I definitely need to go back and rewatch that. But you're totally right. I mean, I think it's scary because he seems kind of like a normal dude on the outside, where it's like if you look at the remake with Robert De Niro, he kind of has like that like sleazeball type persona on him just by looking at him. Whereas this is a different case. You look at him, he just seems like a normal dude, like just out and about, until you see that darker side kind of come out throughout the film.
Absolutely. He plays the character really, really wonderfully. And the whole film was actually shot in black and white for atmosphere. It wasn't shot in black and white out of necessity, but rather it was an artistic choice. And this was because the director J. Lee Thompson really loved Hitchcock. Like really, really, really loved Hitchcock.
That makes
And
sense. Yeah.
you can see that a lot. There are a lot of Hitchcockian elements throughout Cape Fear. So we get the lighting and the shadowing, we get lots and lots of close-ups. We get hints of violence, but not necessarily like full on getting to see everything that's happening. And then, of course, the score, which is outstanding. Cape Fear was scored by Bernard Herrmann, who was known for his collaborations with Hitchcock. And that is where we get that iconic Cape Fear music.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Because like the whole time I was watching this, just kept thinking of Hitchcock the whole way through. And I actually just rewatched Rear Window last weekend, especially with the score. And I didn't know that it was made black and white on purpose, but it totally makes sense, especially towards the back half, like towards the end of the movie. A lot of the visuals are fantastic with the black and white.
I completely, completely agree. So let's actually get into the plot of this. It, of course, opens up with that infamous Cape Fear music. And we get to see Max Cady, played by Robert Mitchum, dressed in a nice white suit, walking and very clearly on a mission. He is heading towards the courthouse. And this, I think, is a very powerful scene for us to start getting an idea of who Max Cady is. Because as he is on this mission to go do something, we see that he doesn't help a woman on a staircase when she drops a bunch of books. He doesn't care about anything. All he wants to do is find Sam Bowen, who is working in the courthouse. And at this point, we don't know why that is.
Yeah, and it's funny because, like you said, he's a man on a mission. He doesn't help the woman, and it also seemed like he wasn't even worried about traffic either. Like he barely stopped. He just kept walking straight through this road.
So we learn pretty quickly that Sam is an attorney, and not only is he an attorney, but he's an extremely lawful attorney. This is extremely different than Scorsese's remake because in his remake, Sam is probably the least lawful attorney. I would never want him to be my attorney. He did not represent his client in any of the ways that he was supposed to. But in this version, we get to see Sam as a true hero.
And he plays it perfectly. Gregory Peck, just something about him as an actor, it just stands out above everything else. I mean, as great as Robert Mitchum is, Gregory Peck, I don't know if it's just like that buttery, warm voice that he has
Yeah.
when he's talking. It's just
Well, everybody except my client, he has money due him, and he's badly in need of it. More important, my chief witness is quite an old man. He might not be alive next fall.
amazing. He's a fantastic actor.
He really, really is. Max goes and watches him in the courthouse and then eventually follows Sam outside and asks Sam if he remembers who he is. This is, again, we get to see a little bit more of Max's personality here because while he's doing this, he's also ogling a woman.
Hey, look at that, would you? Look at that wiggle. Maybe she thinks we don't know that's on purpose.
And he makes sure that Sam knows that he knows that Sam has a wife and a kid.
You want to be an expert on such things, Counselor. Here you got your good-looking wife and got a daughter going to be just like it. Give my love to the family, Counselor. I'll be seeing you.
He's basically making these little veiled threats.
Yeah, and it's so creepy. Just the way that he just comes in and snatches the keys out of the ignition when he wasn't paying attention.
And there is a similar scene in the remake. I actually think that it's more powerful in the original. I think the reason that it's more powerful in the original is because in the remake, at the time that we see the key snatching out of the car, we already know that Sam is maybe not such a great guy. He's having an affair. We know that he's not necessarily a true representation of good. But at this point in the film, we have no reason to think bad of Sam. Later in that night, Sam and his family go out bowling, and Max goes so that he can get a look at them, which is just plain old creepy.
Yeah, and he's even creeping out like the waitress that tries to help him too.
Yes, yeah, he offers $20 to buy the waitress.
It's crazy. And it's like, what do you think of that? He just slides her like the $20.
That actress is actually played by Joan Staley, who is a Playboy playmate, or she
Oh wow.
was. Probably not still. Actually, I think she might still be alive, but she's probably not still a Playboy playmate.
Yeah.
It's possible, I guess. He is just generally creepy. Max is just generally creepy during this scene. We already can tell that he is going to be the evil character, even if we don't necessarily know exactly what his motives are.
Yeah, just the way that he's like eyeing up his daughter and everything. Like I don't have kids, but just like seeing movies like this, it just genuinely just creeps me out.
Yeah, and this movie, actually, let's take a moment to divert from talking about the plot for a second, and we'll just talk about the kids stuff. There is a lot of uncomfortable things happening with Max Katie's eventual relationship with Sam's daughter, Nancy. And that obviously happens in the remake as well. However, here it's almost more horrific because in the original Cape Fear, you can tell that the daughter has no interest in him and is terrified of him. She's not intrigued by him. She's not it's just him being a horrible, horrible old man who is interested in a young girl.
Yeah, you just have that sense of innocence with her.
Yes, absolutely. And I do think she's a little bit younger than Juliette Lewis's character in the remake.
Yeah, what they I think they said that she was like 12 or
Yes,
something. She
I
she
think
looks like
so.
the old 12-year-old ever. Like she just looks like an adult, just like a
Yes.
smaller adult.
I think that it's the hair. I think
It
it's
has
the
to be.
like, it's
Yeah.
gotta be the hair because she definitely looks extremely, extremely young. And we know now at this point, that a big part of what Max's motive is that he has some sort of history with Sam, but we don't know what that history is, but we're already starting to get the idea that the way he's going to get back at Sam is not necessarily through Sam, but through his family. So we know that all of these kind of voyeuristic outings that he's making, where he's going and looking at the daughter and looking at the mother, those are extremely nefarious. There is no reason that he should be doing that unless he is planning something absolutely awful.
Yeah, and I think to me it also like makes it a little darker and a little creepier because it is like the 60s, especially for me like watching these older movies. It just makes it that much more creepier. Whereas today it's like, oh, it's just another creep or, serial killer or something like that. I don't know, it's just when I think of like the 60s or those types of movies, like there's a sense of innocence to them where you have a dark character like this just kind of in there. I don't know, it just makes things that much more darker and creepier than like any other movie. Like I like this to me watching this kind of made me more creeped out than like Psycho that came out around the same time.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I think that as those films go, this is probably one of the most difficult to watch of the '60s stuff. I would say Night of the Hunter is also up there. I can't wait for you to watch that. But also another one that has a lot of similar feelings to this film is Peeping Tom, which also came out in I think '61. And that also has that like, whoa, I feel very, very uncomfortable watching all of these things. Why is this happening here? So
Exactly.
so because Sam is so extremely creeped out by Max Katie's presence, he actually goes to the police chief and they have a conversation, which is when we finally find out why Max has it out for him. So it turns out that Sam was in Baltimore and he overheard a woman being attacked. And so he stopped the attack. And then he eventually had to testify against Max, which was what put Max into jail for 8 years. This is hugely, hugely different in the remake. I already kind of hinted at this a little bit, but in the remake, Sam is Max's attorney, and he purposely didn't represent Max well. He was basically playing the judge, jury, and executioner in the remake. But in this one, he's just a good citizen.
Which makes it that much more weird where like the villain is like, you took 8 years away from my life. All this is like, well, it's your fault, man. Like, what are you blaming him for? You did it.
There's a later conversation that happens in the film between Max and Sam that I think is one of the most important conversations in the film, where the two of them are sitting down and talking, and Sam is trying to bribe Max to go away.
How much do you want, Kitty?
How's that again?
You heard me. I said, how much do you want?
And Max's response to that is You sent me away for 8 years. What is the value of that 8 years?
That takes a little figuring, counselor.
He says he also lost his wife and his kid because of this. His wife left him because of this.
You probably didn't even know I had a family, did you?
Sam is like, well, yeah, of course. What did you expect to happen? Obviously, your wife was going to leave you. You were raping a woman. Of course, she left you. Max's response to that is, no, no, no. That's not why she left me.
It was the prison rap that she couldn't take. She just couldn't stand the disgrace. And that was your doing, counselor, not my doing.
She left me because she couldn't stand being so embarrassed by the fact that I had been taken to jail. That was your fault. And that just brings this extremely, extremely interesting question to the forefront, which is, what is worse, committing the crime or being caught for the crime? And so Max Cady doesn't see himself as a bad person. He sees the people who stop him from doing what he wants to do as the bad people. And that's wild.
Yeah, it's psychotic.
So going back into the plot, because Sam has met with the police chief, the chief thinks that he is possibly going to be able to catch Max on something. He's like, we're going to get him within the confines of the law because, again, in the original Cape Fear, we are law-abiding citizens. We do everything right, unlike the remake. So the chief is like, well, maybe he didn't register to be living here. But it turns out that Max did. He is extremely thorough. We can tell that he is a meticulous criminal and a clever criminal. He's not an idiot. He's just a bad guy.
Yeah, and he even has that one small specific line, 'cause it doesn't really come up again, about how he was studying law, like
Yes.
whenever he was in jail and everything. So he was making sure he was well read up on all these things before he got out.
He spent that 8 years preparing for this moment.
Hmm.
So they later end up arresting Max at a bar. I don't really understand why they were able to arrest him. I guess just because he's out drinking. He's not drunk. He's not being a menace. But I don't know. I haven't.
He's just
Did
trying
you
to
pick up
pick
on
up
that?
another guy's woman.
Yeah, that was it. That was the only thing. And he actually tells that woman, her name is Diane. He actually tells her when they arrest him, he's like, "Just give me an hour. I'll be back. Get rid of your other guys."
Are you trying to pick me up?
Yes.
And she does it, which is also wild.
It's crazy. Well, she's in the Bad Dudes apparently, as you come to find out.
Yes, yes.
But I didn't seem like they were trying to arrest him. They were just like, "Come on, we want to talk with you." And he's like, "Oh, I'm fine with talking." And he knows he's well within his rights.
That's a really good point. He doesn't resist the cops. He's ultra confident. He's very cooperative. He goes back to the station with them. He's like, I'm not drunk. I have money, which is one of the requirements for being able to live, I guess. And he agrees to a strip search.
I suppose you thought I was going to object to a strip search, didn't you, Chief? No, sirree, not me. Like I said, I'm a cooperative guy. Let's make what the pants. Coming up.
Which is where we get one of the most infamous scenes in both the original and the remake, which is the character of Max Cady getting strip searched. I think especially in the remake, this is just so iconic because you're looking at his Loretta tattoo, and we don't have all the same tattoos here, but it's still an extremely powerful scene.
Yeah, he's just showing him he has nothing to hide, and even like when they ask him where all this money's coming from, he tells them exactly who to contact at the bank. Like they're good for it. Like the way I get my money is legit.
That is an interesting scene as well, actually, for me, because, okay, so they're at the station. The chief is there. Sam is there. Obviously, Max Cady is there. And he tells Max, yeah, you should tell them where you got the money, which is the worst lawyer advice ever. Don't tell the cops anything. So that was the only place where I was like, okay, maybe that's not like the best lawyering that I've seen in my entire life. But it's because he is so terrified. Sam is so terrified at this point already of Max. He doesn't know what he's capable of. Or maybe better said, he does know what he's capable of.
Yeah, and you also have like the other lawyer that it seems like Sam knows. I'm guessing throughout, being a lawyer and such. But he's kind of turning on him because he even makes a point of saying like, "I've never heard you say something like that before." I forget exactly what Sam says, but he's like, "I've never heard you say something like that. That's weird." Which you can tell how serious it is at that moment that Sam's actually saying that.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So Sam decides that he needs to find legal ways to convince Max to leave town because Max doesn't want to leave town and they don't have anything that they can convict him on. So this is very complicated. They can't figure anything out because, again, Max is so thorough. And while they're having this conversation, Sam is at home. They're actually on the phone together, and we can hear Sam's dog barking. We know this dog has all bark and no bite. And so we know something bad is going to happen to the dog, which is not great. If the dog is barking, that means that somebody is there. But we know that the dog is not going to attack that person.
And then it just goes quiet, and you're like,
It
"Uh-oh."
goes quiet.
No.
And Peggy eventually runs up, Peggy, Sam's wife, eventually runs up to say that their dog is having a fit and it subsequently dies. I don't like animal deaths in movies.
No. As soon as they started mentioning the dog and everything, I had a feeling that
Yeah.
something bad was gonna happen.
Yes, yes. The dog, there was much foreshadowing with the dog, and unfortunately, it did not work out well for the dog. But again, that gives us an idea. We don't have any proof that Max did this, but we really, really suspect that he did. It seems like he did it. And it makes him much more menacing because now we know he's willing to take action and he's willing to do really awful things.
Yeah, and I love how they don't really show anything that he's doing behind the scenes, where I feel like a lot of other movies, they would show, like, either, like, a close-up of someone's feet kinda sneaking up on the property or maybe going, like, little like, in the darkness, showing somebody out in, like, in their yard or property or something. No, everything is just completely off screen. You just assume that he is doing everything.
And that's what makes it so challenging for Sam as well, because again, he can't actually capture him within the confines of law. Sam and Peggy end up having a private conversation, and during that conversation, Peggy tells Sam that a man like Katie doesn't deserve civil rights. And I think that that's the crux of the issue in this film that it kind of examines. That's the theme of this film is how do we determine when we need to take the law into our own hands because the justice system is not functioning well enough for us. Katie manages to function outside of the justice system.
Yeah, and I think it boils down to that line I believe the chief has where he mentions, like, "Well, it's either we have too many laws or not enough laws, like, going against these things." I mentioned Psycho a couple times, but it bears to actually, like, mention that the police chief, who's played by Martin Balsam, I believe his last name is, he's actually the detective in Psycho who's investigating the disappearance and where the money went and everything. So it was really cool to see him as, like, another detective in kind of like a similar type movie involving, a crazy sociopath.
And actually, did you know that the hotel that is used in this movie? So pretty soon we're going to be getting to the hotel scene with Diane, who Katie met at the bar. That's actually the mother's house from Psycho. That hotel.
For real? I didn't know
Yeah,
that. That's
yeah.
awesome.
So again, J. Lee Thompson was a huge, huge Hitchcock fan. You could tell that he was doing everything
Definitely.
that he could to give nods to Hitchcock.
That's amazing. I didn't know that.
So Sam ends up getting summoned to a meeting with the police chief, Max's attorney, and they are all starting to accuse Sam of being the one who's doing bad things. He's harassing Max Katie because he keeps accusing Max of doing all of these things. And the attorney that Max hired has a reputation and is a really good attorney. But Sam kind of sneakily convinces him that Max might not be so forthcoming with him because he actually asks at one point, Katie is like, "Oh, well, I know that Sam's house is under cop surveillance." And Sam is like, "Well, how would you know that unless you were going all around my house?"
You're referring to my house.
Yes, I am.
Then I ask, who furnished you with that information?
Well, I think you will find that this is a matter of common knowledge in the department.
And that's the first time that Max's attorney, that Katie's attorney, starts actually realizing, like, oh shit, maybe my client is doing some really fucked up shit. And it's a cool moment to get to see that realization on screen.
Yeah, because it's like that night, that little pivot moment. Because the whole scene up to that point is the lawyer just being like, "Well, there's a pattern of what's going on here. Like, he's been booked twice in this day. He's been booked 3 times throughout the last week. It seems like there's a certain pattern going on, like, he's being harassed." And then you have that little pivot moment that just it's amazing to end the scene.
Yep. I love that so much. So as a result of all of this, the chief basically says to Sam, he's like, "Listen, there's just nothing that we can do until he does something." And Sam is terrified of that. He's like, "What do you mean? Like, he's going to do something. We all know that he's going to do something." So the confines of the law are not helping at all right now.
Yeah, it's like the chief said, he's like, I forget the lady's name he mentions, but he's like, "Well, she came to me 5 times about, his her husband beating her, like, trying to kill her, and then it eventually happened, but there wasn't anything he could do about it because there was no evidence or no proof."
What are you gonna do? Literally, you can't do anything. And this is a problem that we still have with our justice system today, actually, as you bring that up. That
Yeah.
absolutely is still something that happens. And on the one hand, it certainly helps protect the innocent in some ways, but it hurts victims a lot. So
Yeah.
meanwhile, Max actually ends up taking Diane out, who's the girl that he met at the bar earlier, as he promised he would. And she calls him an animal because she clearly likes bad boys.
You're just an animal. Coarse, lustful, barbaric.
Keep right on talking, honey.
She says something to the effect of like, "What I like about you is that I know that you're rock bottom. Like, it
Yeah,
can't get any worse than you."
Max Cady, what I like about you is you're rock bottom. I wouldn't expect you to understand this, but it's a great comfort for a girl to know she could not possibly sink any lower.
like, "Oh my god." Like, "What are you looking for?"
But she's kinda horny when she says it. Like, you can tell
Yeah,
that she's like, "Yes, this is
she's into it.
wonderful." Yeah, she's so into it. At this point, Sam has hired a PI in order to kind of trail Katie so that he can at least know what's going on, because again, he can't do anything to him legally, so he has to operate elsewhere. And because of that, the PI spots the fact that Max has taken this girl into the hotel, AKA Mother's house from Psycho,
Mhm.
and they decide that they are going to pick Max up on lewd vagrancy,
He's in the room with her now. 2041 Sherman. She's over 18, but you can still get him for lewd vagrancy.
which I thought was a hilarious fucking term.
I had to Google that. I was like, "What the hell would you consider lewd vagrancy?"
Yeah, it's hilarious. So basically the way that I would describe it, let me know if you saw something different, but the way that I would describe it was old-timey laws that are against lustful acts. That's
Yeah.
basically the
That's
the
pretty much the gist that I read, like, that came up immediately when I looked it up because I was confused. I was like, "What? I have no clue what lewd vagrancy is." Like, you just picked up a woman to take her back to a hotel. What's wrong with that?
he's not a vagrant if he has a hotel, and he's not being lewd if he's in private. I don't know. It's weird. It's very, very weird. But they do need to pick him up on that because they make a point to say she's over 18. We can't pick Max up on the other stuff. And again, this is reinforcing the idea that maybe a lot of Max's victims have actually been under 18. We know that he's kind of targeting Sam's daughter, but we didn't hear about his attack on this other woman being an attack on a young woman. The fact that they keep bringing that up really makes it seem like his interests might have been young girls.
Yeah, they never, like, straightforward say that. They don't even go as far as, like, saying, like, he raped the other woman. They just said that
Yep.
he was, like, an attacker. So I'm like, maybe it was just, like, a little too dark for them to, like, mention those types of things. Like, they just kinda allude to them. They just didn't wanna go as far as mention them.
I do think that the censors actually blocked quite a bit of things, at least the rape word, which yay, censors on YouTube also will be blocking that. But they definitely took out some of the references overtly to rape. And I definitely think that they kind of wanted to avoid the pedophilia stuff too, which is understandable
Yeah.
because that makes this much more awful.
Yeah, for sure.
So now the PI has sent the actual cops over to the hotel room, but it is unfortunately too late. Katie is animalistically grabbing at Diane in an extremely harrowing scene. That scene is painful to watch.
Yeah, it's so tense. Just the way that he's like sitting there staring at her, and you can just feel the uneasiness that she has when he's staring back at her. And then it just kind of slowly goes behind like those blinds and everything. It's so effective.
You can see the moment where she goes from having fun to not having fun.
Yeah.
You don't catch that. That is hard to imitate in cinema, and she does it so extremely perfectly, and it just makes it painful and tragic. And you're just waiting. You know that the cops have been called, so you're just waiting for them to bust in, which of course they finally do. But unfortunately, Max has already escaped, and Diane is laying beaten on the floor.
Yeah, it's an amazing scene.
It is powerful, very powerful. So the private investigator tries to convince Diane that she should use the law in order to get Katie convicted. He's like, hey, come on, let's like get this guy in jail because that will solve all of Sam's problems. That would be a wonderful thing. Did you pick up on the fact that the way that he tries to convince her to testify against him is that he's like, I'll bring you down to homicide and I'll show you pictures of what could have happened to you.
Right? I thought that was a little strange.
Let me take you down to the Homicide Bureau. I'll show you photographs of girls who got mixed up with men like Katie. And Miss Taylor, it'll make you sick.
Don't
Like, why would you
do
say that to
a
her right now?
victim.
Like, yeah, don't do that. She just went through some shit. Why are you doing this now?
That's so awful. She's like, sir, she's the victim. Do not mess with her in that way. But unfortunately, she values her reputation more than she values putting him away. So she says, no, I just want to leave town. I don't want to do this.
Yeah, because she's like, if you sign this paper, we can put him away for like another 6 months. And she's
Yep.
like, well, what happens after then? Like, then he can come after me or whatever. And like, that's when you know how good a movie is or how effective it is, because there's multiple moments throughout this movie where I was like just starting to get angry because of some of the decisions these characters were making. And that's
Yeah.
how, like, those are just signs of a great movie, because like she has her reasons, but at the same time it's like you want her to be able to put this dude away. Like, what's stopping you? Like, why are you leaving? Like, help them out, please.
Well, it shows again how the confines of the law make things extremely difficult when there is a really bad person. And again, for me, that is exactly why it's so important that we have clearly delineated good and evil characters in this film, because we can see that Diane is not an evil character. She hasn't, to our knowledge, she hasn't done anything wrong. And yet the law can't help her without her hurting herself. That's the point of the movie. Like, I need to want Sam to be okay, and he can't be okay within the confines of the law. He has to take the law into his own hands, and the film escalates and escalates because of that situation.
Yeah, and they even like get him there to try to talk to her before she ends up leaving, but she's like, nope, I'm on the first bus out of here.
So do you remember the parallel scene to the Diane scene in the remake, which is with Ileana Douglas's character?
I don't know.
It's the cheek bite. I feel
Okay,
like
I think I
that's
remember
the
it. Yeah.
most infamous. So De Niro bites her cheek as a part of this attack. So it's effectively the same scene. The major difference is that there is profanity and violence, like a lot of violence. We see the cheek biting. We hear swear words. What I think is just so incredible and painstaking to watch about the original is that we don't have any of that. There's no profanity in this movie. We hardly see any blood, like the teeniest, tiniest bit. Almost all of the attacks are off screen, unless they're fights between men. This is a very prude-ish film in that way, and yet you're terrified.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Jaws effect, like the less is more approach, because I feel like what's going on in people's imaginations could probably 10 times worse than what they could show on screen, especially at that time. So it's just as effective for people to wonder, like, oh, is he doing this? Is he doing that? Like, what's happening? And actually show it on the screen.
Yeah, that's a really great point. So at this point, they have to go back to the drawing board. So the PI actually suggests that Sam hire some dudes from down on the dock to rough up Max.
That's my advice.
Which I was like, That's not gonna do anything.
And it's like at that point, I was also thinking like, "Oh, why wouldn't, like, try to get" I know it's a bad dude, so he's probably not gonna follow, but why not get an restraining order or something? And then I looked that up, and I was like, restraining orders weren't even around until, like, the '70s, so that was out of the question at that point.
Okay, so what would you do in this situation? Do you get people to rough him up?
I don't I mean, I would've went a different route than he would've in the movie. I would've had maybe the private detective maybe contact them to pay them off instead of him doing it directly, so
Yeah.
you have a middleman in between you so it doesn't trace back to you immediately. I would have maybe tried to be a little bit more precautious going that route, because obviously you don't want to go out and handle it yourself. You're going to get arrested or you're going to
Yep.
get in trouble. I don't know. I feel like there's definitely a better route he could have taken. But I mean, I think it just ups the stakes a little bit more throughout the movie, the way that he goes here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, he's trying to do things as his lawful hero type would. And each step he kind of goes a little bit further. So as things are escalating, we get to see Max being even creepier. So we have another sequence where Max goes and watches Nancy, the daughter, while she's working on a boat, and he calls her Juicy. He says, Juicy, she's becoming juicy like her mother.
Say, she's getting to be almost as juicy as your wife, ain't she?
Yeah. That was like before he even says that too, he's just standing above her looking down at her. It's just so damn creepy. In public too. Like nobody's like because I feel like nowadays if you see an older dude watching a young girl like that, someone's gonna say something, you know.
Now,
But
if
it's
you
like
see a legitimate father who is a good human hanging out with their child, sometimes people get freaked out. Like,
exactly.
it's not okay what he was doing. That was just so uncomfortable. And unsurprisingly, this is the first time that Sam really truly is doing something that he absolutely should not be, which is that he goes up there and he beats Max up.
Yeah, he loses his cool.
He's like, "Don't do this. This is not okay."
Yeah, and of course Max is just like, "Oh, you saw it. You saw it. You just hit me for no reason. I didn't do anything."
Never laid a hand on him. Just standing here minding my own business, a man walks right up and starts beating the... How about that?
I didn't do anything. Why is he just going out and hitting me for no reason? So again, Max is able to kind of spin whatever truth he wants to spin.
Just one step ahead each time.
Because he hasn't gotten caught yet, he now has the ability to go and stalk Nancy at her school. This is another shot where the shadowing is absolutely incredible and so Hitchcockian. You alternate between hearing footsteps, breathing, and this really tense music. And the whole time you're on the edge of your seat because you're like, run, Nancy, run. Like, you're like, he's right behind you. It feels almost like that slasher killer sort of feel without being that.
It is, especially, like, in that the beginning too, like, where she's in the car and every time she looks up, he's just, like, a little closer to her walking down that street. Oh, it's so tense.
It is so crazy. So the way that she actually ends up escaping is that she runs out into the street and she gets hit by a car.
After she, like, goes through the school, and it's, like, a janitor or whatever that was actually following her, like, it's a whole misdirection too. So I was like, why would you run in and, like, why is there nobody in the school, first off? Didn't you just get out of school?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
you can't get back in because it's immediately locked, but I like the, like, little red herring there, like, that you think he's chasing her, but it's actually somebody else.
When Sam finds out that she is feeling so threatened, he again escalates and he grabs for his gun. And Peggy, his wife, is like, don't do that. It will be murder if you do that. That's a horrible idea. Please do not go kill this man. She is so upset about it that she actually threatens to call the cops on Sam. She's like, don't, like, no, 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 no.
I mean, I remember like seeing that scene, and of course, I know it's wrong, but at the same time, I was like, "Yeah, Sam,
Yeah.
get the gun. It's time to go to work. Like, do what you gotta do."
He
And then, like, I
finally
kind of
grew some balls.
exactly, and then I got a little upset because the wife was like, "I'm gonna call the cops." Like, you're supposed to be his ride or die. What are you doing? You gotta call the cops on him.
That definitely I mean, they are, like, the perfect Leave It to Beaver family, so, like, they have to be, like, perfect and pristine and everything is great. This is the first time that I think Sam gets the idea that he's like, "Okay, no, she's right. If I do kill him, I will go to jail, and then I'll be abandoning my family, and that would also be bad. What I gotta do is I gotta find a way to kill him when he's attacking me."
Mhm.
We gotta work that out, and so that's kind of how the end of the movie starts getting spun, but before he starts spinning that plan, he does make another attempt to get Max out of his life, which is that he goes and bribes Max. He's like, "I'll give you $20,000 over the course of the next 3 years in order for you to leave town and never bother me ever again."
That's crazy. Like, I know it was the '60s, but still, like, $20,000, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. So, it's interesting because Max actually brings up, he's like, that's not even minimum wage."
Counselor, I don't believe you heard of the Minimum Wage Act.
Like, "What are you don't you know minimum wage laws, counselor?" I think is what he says. So I looked it up, and the minimum wage at the time was $1.15 an hour, which works out to $2,392 a year. And Sam was effectively offering $25,000 a year. So he was actually offering slightly more than minimum wage, but he wasn't offering any sort of value for the loss of Max's wife, the loss of his daughter, the loss of, all of these other things.
Yeah, what is that worth to you?
What is that worth? What is the value? What is the value? And Max, during this time, this is when he actually says, "Well, I had a wife and a kid." And then he tells an awful, awful story about what he did to his wife.
So when I got out, I went to visit her.
So he got out of jail. And then after he spent 8 years in the slammer for attacking a woman, he was upset that his wife left him because of Sam, obviously. That's the only reason that his
Yeah,
wife
you
left
know,
him was
Sam's the
because of
bad
Sam.
guy.
Sam's the bad guy here. He was upset that his wife left him, so he went back to find his wife, who had remarried and had new kids, and he forcibly made her sign a paper that basically said, "Oh, no, I'm into you. I like all this stuff." And then he attacked her for 3 days.
Yeah. And then, like, Bride said that if she ever, like, went and told on her or something, he would mail the letter to her husband or something like that. Like, this dude is out of his mind. Like, you could just tell he's been stewing for 8 years trying to figure out everything.
Because that letter would make it seem like what he did to her was consensual, and we get into that kind of later in the film as well. It it's so I mean, again, if you have 8 years to do nothing, you're gonna be thinking about a lot of stuff, but meticulous. He was so extremely meticulous. So he gets out of jail, he fucks with his ex-wife for 3 days, and then he immediately goes to fuck over Sam. There's gotta be somebody else on his hit list, right?
You would think.
He's gotta be mad at somebody else. Like, there's no way that those are the only people that he's mad at, and he's such an asshole, I feel like he's got a whole list, and he's just going through it.
Yeah, like, why stop at Sam? Like, what about the jurors? What about the judge? Like, everybody else that was involved with the case to put you away.
Well, another good point there actually is why not the newspapers who made it public? So if really the problem was that she was disgraced, then shouldn't you be upset at the newspapers, not at the person who caught you? Is that really what the catalyst was? Max obviously denies this deal. He's like, I don't want your money. I am staying in this town." And Sam is very upset about the fact that he won't take the deal. So he tries to convince his wife that they have to do something because if they don't do something, then Max is going to attack their daughter. And if Max attacks their daughter, she is going to end up having to testify against Max. Everybody seems to think that this is the worst thing in the world. And it's true that, especially in the 60s, the reputation that you would get if you were testifying against somebody, you were going to be marred. You're going to get questioned. All of the things you don't want to come out about you are going to come out. You're going to have to describe in vivid detail every single thing that happened. It's not pleasant.
They didn't wanna put a little girl through all that.
So they decide that they are going to take the private investigators' recommendation and have the dock boys beat up Max. This ends up backfiring marvelously because they do beat up Max, but then Max actually beats them all up.
I was like, "How did they just bungle this so badly?" Like, you had 3 dudes, like, you think you coulda got, like, maybe 4 or 5, something
No,
like that. Nope.
Nope, nope. He sends all 3 of them to the hospital, and they immediately tell everybody, "Sam hired us," because they are beaten and battered and terrified for their lives.
It's like, "Why didn't you have a middle person? You shoulda got somebody to hire them for you. What are you doing?"
I know. Well, he didn't have 8 years to think about it.
That's true.
That
You're
was the
right.
problem, that was
He
the
didn't expect
problem.
it to come back on him at any point. Like, we wouldn't expect one dude to be able to go out and beat up 3, 4 guys that are attacking him.
No, no, not even a little bit. So, now that they have this evidence, Max's attorney actually turns Sam in and tries to get him disbarred. And this leads us to the final act of the film, which is, of course, where it gets so, so, so exciting. So Sam takes Peggy and Nancy to their houseboat on Cape Fear River, which, of course, is where we get the name for this movie. They are on Cape Fear River. I think that at some point somebody asked J. Lee Thompson, like, why did you name the movie Cape Fear? And he was like, movies with place names do well. Okay, cool.
And what an appropriate name for, like, the
Yes,
situation that they're in as well. "Let's go to Cape Fear."
it really is. It really, really is. So Sam is using the fact that he's about to get disbarred to his advantage. He tries to trick Max into thinking that he's gone to Atlanta to testify about the potential disbarment, but he is going to instead stay and protect his family. So he starts out the final act by laying out his entire plan, and then we just get to wait and see how it actually unfolds. I hated the airport scene. Let's start out with that. Can we talk about the airport scene?
What did you hate about it?
I hated it so much. So, the way that he convinces Max that he is gone in Atlanta is that he goes to the airport and then he fake gets on an airplane. And then Max shows up and he goes and he asks one of the people who works at the airport, "Hey, can you please tell me if that guy got on the plane and also when he's coming back?" And the airport lady's like, "Yes, here's all of the information that you see."
It's literally all the information I have on it.
What, like, also his height is such and such, his social security number, like,
Just
why are
because he had a
these
package for him.
so I had forgotten about that scene because the first time that I saw this movie was quite some time ago. I rewatched the remake as well, and I was like, "They can't possibly do that scene again, right?" Like, that scene doesn't make any sense. They do that damn scene
The
again.
same damn scene.
The same day I mean, they beef it up a little bit, so, like, they make Max Cady kind of manipulate the airport worker a little bit more. He hams it up, but she still gives him all the information.
Yeah, whereas this one, he just literally just asks her a question.
I want another remake of Cape Fear, and I want all of the joys of the original where it is a true good versus evil and no airport scene. That is, like, the most important thing to me when this gets remade again, please.
Well, I think it would be super interesting to do it now, especially given, like, all of the, like, technological advancements we have and security cameras and such to see how, like, Max would go about setting all this up type of thing.
Ah.
It would be very interesting to see how he would kind of engineer this whole plan that he has around everything we have now, whether it's like cell phones or video cameras and stuff like that.
You know what's also really interesting about that actually? So in this one, he is sent away to jail for 8 years. In the remake, he is sent away for 14 years. If you had been sent away to jail 14 years ago and just got out today, you wouldn't know about Ring cameras. You wouldn't know how amazing cell phones have gotten. You wouldn't know about all the technology. So how would he get bumbled up?
Exactly. He wouldn't know any of this.
I like that very
He'd be
much.
caught instantly.
He's very clever. Maybe he wouldn't.
Maybe. You never know. Maybe because he knows how to live like a low profile type lifestyle. So you never know.
Hmm. Interesting. Very interesting. So we know that Sam obviously did not get on the airplane. Nancy and Peggy are already on the houseboat, and we all of a sudden start hearing splashing and walking, and we don't know if it's Max Cady or if it's Sam coming to be with his family. And that scene is just heart pounding and terrifying. And I am like, are they gonna be okay? Like, is everything okay? What's happening? What's happening? But happily, it is in fact Sam.
Yeah, I was the same way because like the daughter hears something first, like the boats, and then like the mom turns down the lights, and I was like, "Oh, what's she gonna do now?" And then she does the smart thing. She grabs the gun and then immediately goes to the door. And I was like, I feel like a lot of the times they never do the smart thing. She immediately knew to grab that gun and go kind of investigate what was happening.
Yes. There isn't a lot of character development with her, but she is a smart woman. We can definitely say that. We also know that Katie is there, and he's actually spying on everybody with binoculars. This is really actually, I think, very interesting because they do something that most other films do not do, which is that usually when you like see binoculars in movies and you're looking through them, you get like the two eye hole thing.
Yeah, on the camera.
They do the one eye hole, which is how it actually looks. And they in cinema that almost never happens. So I really love the touch of realism there. And I think that that makes this that much scarier and spookier.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually it made me kind of laugh because you actually cut to like Sam and he has like the one policeman that's like
Yeah.
with him who
Yep.
also has the binoculars. And I just kept thinking about like how funny it would be if like Max like turns and then he sees the dude with the binoculars and they're like looking at each other. And it made me think of like Always Sunny in Philadelphia where like Mac and
Yes.
Charlie are looking at each other from across the diner, like that little meme.
I
It
love
made me
that.
laugh out loud.
So he and the private investigator actually hide in the swamp awaiting Katie's arrival. I like those shots a lot. I think they're really beautiful. I think that they're peaceful in a way that you would not expect them to be peaceful.
Yeah, and I think this is where the black and white really helps with the visual style, like given like all the different like leaves and the trees and like the like weeds growing up out of the lake and everything. And like the light coming out of like the windows onto the like the leaves and the trees and stuff. It's amazing. Different shots and like the low angles that he kind of incorporates.
Katie is so, so, so terrifying here. He unties the boat so that it starts drifting down the river, and he wades through the water again, almost like a slasher killer.
He like slithers like a snake.
Yeah, it's so ugh, I don't even like thinking about it. It gives me goosebumps. While he's doing this, Nancy, the daughter, is just kind of like playing with a ping pong ball. That made me laugh because I was like, she has been bopping that ping pong ball for like 20 minutes.
Hours.
And also, any kid today would just be, like, on their phone. She's very, very, very bored. She's so bored. She's almost unbothered by the fact that they are potentially going to be stalked and killed.
Yeah,
She's just like, "Oh, ping pong ball. That's great."
like ping pong ball and then listening to records because whenever they come into the room later, it's just like records all over that ping pong table. So like those are the only two things she could do.
It shows her innocence for sure. So, unfortunately, Katie does end up hearing the other investigator that is there. The investigator swats a fly away from himself. Do not make noise in front of Katie. He is
Literally just
obviously
slaps himself to get that.
yeah, he's like, no, that was a very bad idea." And Katie silently kills him. The shadows on that are particularly amazing. Nobody notices what's going on. That's how stealthy Katie is. He just is coming up from nowhere. He figured out what was going on. He knows he's being watched. He knows that he can absolutely take anything that stands in his way. And he does.
Yeah. And that's what I was thinking. Like, if you were the dude he was trying to kill, I know like it's hard to think whenever somebody's trying to kill you, but like at the very least you would want somebody to know that you're in trouble. So why wouldn't you be like trying to splash around or make as much noise as possible? Or like he put him in that headlock and he was done at that point. Like he didn't seem like he tried to make any noise.
I think Katie just subdued him so quickly. He literally didn't have a chance.
Not at all.
So with the boat adrift, Katie goes first to attack Peggy, the mom.
Yeah, tense. This scene is
Mhm.
tense, super scary.
Yes, and he actually explains again this thing about consent.
Don't you understand that with consent, there are no charges against me?
If I get consent from you, then there's going to be no charges over what I'm about to do to you.
Yeah,
That's fucked up.
it's so fucked up.
That's not how consent works.
No, not one bit. And you can genuinely feel the terror in the mom in that scene. Like it seems so real.
She is doing everything that she can in order to protect her daughter. There's almost no protecting because Max is just fucking awful. and he's gonna take whatever the hell he wants. And so all she can do is distract him a little bit. But unfortunately, because Max is attacking her, Sam tries to come to her rescue. But really, this entire time, Max's whole target has been the daughter. And so that was just kind of a diversion tactic. And now the daughter is by herself.
And I mean, just to make it makes that scene even scarier because of not only the implication, what he's saying, but also he's like, "Well, if you don't want to do that, I can have the daughter anytime I want, tomorrow, next week."
I was gonna go for Nancy. But I can always make it with Nancy, next week, next month. Wait a minute now.
Or you can just give yourself up now and I don't even have to deal with your daughter type thing. And it's like, I don't know, it's just the way he was describing things, it just like makes your hair stand up on your arms. Like it's so effective and how creepy that scene is set.
It is so creepy. The entire thing was a ploy. And not only that, but the whole film set us up for that scene, right? Because we needed to know about Katie trying to get consent from his ex-wife in a similar way. We needed to know about him liking the daughter. We needed to know why he's trying to do this, what he's trying to take away from Sam. And now it's just this culmination of just pure terror. And I hate it and I love it.
At the same time, yeah.
Yes. I don't wanna watch it, but oh my god.
Can't look away.
I can't look away. I can't look away. And now I'm afraid for the daughter who is back ashore. So Sam goes to run after her and he catches up with her and he tells her run and he ends up getting in a fight with Max. This is the final battle of the two of them.
Yeah. I mean, that scene between just Max and the daughter, that little scene was tense too. Cause like you want her to fight because she even picks up like the fireplace poker, but you can just like the innocence with her, she's just so in shock. She can't do anything.
Yep, absolutely. And that fireplace poker, we had gotten a little allusion to that earlier in the film too.
She picked up a poker, tried to hit me over the head with it.
So it was nice to see the fireplace poker coming back. So during this fight sequence, Gregory Peck in real life accidentally hit Robert Mitchum, and Mitchum just kept acting through it. But he went on to say, I would never want to get in a fight with him. He was really strong. And I was like, that's actually pretty incredible.
Yeah.
I would think that Mitchum would win in a fight between the two of them, but
I would
don't
have
know,
I
maybe
would have
I'm
thought
wrong.
so too.
Yeah.
Just because of how like burly he is.
Yeah, he seems very burly. So the two of them, they're in this squabble, and Sam ends up kind of disabling Katie by hitting him with a rock.
Yeah, where he's trying to drown him.
So then Katie gets this like weird stick weapon that has like a huge screw on the end. It felt very like Art the Clown Terrifier to me.
Yeah.
Like, where did that come from?
I don't know. I don't know if it was just broken off the dock or if it was like maybe part of something that was being built. But yeah, it looked like a pickaxe at first when I originally saw it. But yeah, they like show that close up where it looks like it's like a bracket with a screw off of it. It was weird.
It's very like the biggest screw that you've ever seen, though, not like a little
Yeah.
baby, like a huge, huge screw.
Yeah.
It was very weird. This is also I really didn't know at this point who was going to win. So like I didn't have a good concept of is good or evil going to be the winner of this fight. The movie was so bizarre, especially for a 60s film, that I didn't think that it was clear that good was going to win. Yes, it's true that good usually wins in movies, but I thought that this might actually throw us for a loop here.
I thought the same exact thing because I knew that the remake kind of took its own liberties with certain things. I had no clue about this movie whatsoever because I didn't have any like idea how it was going to end. So I was on the edge of my seat the whole time.
Of course, in the tussle, even though Katie has this big crazy stick, Sam does manage to grab a gun and he shoots and does not kill Katie. So he shoots him and disables him even further.
I was going to say it's genius because that's exactly what he wants is for him to kill him, put him out of his misery and everything. Because I was right there with you. I was like, blast him again, like unload the clip on him. And then I thought about it. I was like, no, that's exactly what he wants. Don't give him
Yeah.
what he wants. Send him back exactly where he hates to be.
Yep. And Katie says exactly that. He says, go ahead. I don't give a damn.
I just don't give a damn.
I don't care if I'm dead. The worst thing for Katie is going to jail. And Sam picks up on that very, very, very quickly.
That would be letting you off too easy.
The whole thing for Max is values. He puts the value on his time, on his life. But if he doesn't have a life, he can't value it. So it does not matter at all if he dies. And so thank goodness Sam has the wherewithal to figure out that that would be letting him off too easy
That would be letting you off too easy.
and that he should go rot in jail.
Yeah, for life at this time.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Fingers crossed. We don't actually know that. The final shot of the film is, of course, the family traveling on a boat back to port. They're all wrapped up in a blanket. Happy times are had for all, except for Max, which is also happy. Yay. I think that the ending is perfect. I would not have wanted this movie to end any other way. It is terrifying, though, because really, we were just talking about another remake of this. You could almost do a sequel to this where Max gets out of jail in 20 years because he's not going to go to jail forever for this. Like, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to, they'll get him on lewd vagrancy again.
I mean, he killed that one person.
Yeah.
He killed one person, so, I don't know if especially around that time, I don't know if that's life or
Yeah.
exactly
Good
what the
point.
sentence would be. But yeah, the ending was amazing, and I like you mentioned, I liked how they went with the black and white, 'cause if this was in color, I don't think it would have been nearly as effective as at least stylistically, because the whole ending, I just kept thinking about, like, how great it looks with the shadows and the different lights on them when they're fighting, and you mentioned there's not much blood in the movie other than, like, after he gets hit with that rock, you can see the blood going down his face, which is just adds to the ending as well. But it's just so tense, like, during that they have that fight, and then he's just kind of crawling through the long grass trying to get to the gun and everything. It just heightens that tension in those
Yeah.
final moments even more so, like, when he's trying to reach out to the gun, and then you have that little tussle where he ends up shooting him. I don't know, I think it wrapped up perfectly. As much as I know everybody wanted Max to probably, get his comeuppance, maybe get killed at the end, I think it was the smart route to go. I mean, it makes sense given his character, and like you mentioned, his freedom and what he values his life. It makes perfect sense to put him back in jail. Like, because that's exactly what he doesn't want. He hates being in jail. He keeps mentioning it throughout the whole movie, how much he hated being in jail for 8 years, let alone now it's possibly life at that point. It's the perfect way to go out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the ending couldn't have possibly been better. I think that this movie all in all is just absolutely stunning.
Mhm.
I don't know that I would want to change very much about it. And I did have a little bit of a hard time with the remake. I love Scorsese, and I think that there's many merits to the remake, but I think that taking the movie away from its roots of being a good versus evil storyline was the wrong move. I want Sam to be inherently good, and he is not inherently good in Scorsese's film. He very much has a gray area. We know that
Mhm.
he's a cheater. We know that he wasn't representing his client correctly. We know that he has done bad things in that movie. In this movie, he's trying to do everything right, and he's getting screwed every time.
Yeah.
Max Cady is unjustifiably angry at him. In the remake, it's totally justifiable that he's angry.
Exactly.
I need it to be for no reason because that's how evil Max Cady is. I want
Yeah.
Max Cady to be so evil that there's just absolutely no explanation to how he's behaving.
Yeah, I think it's more effective that way. It's more scarier that way.
Yes.
Because like
It could
it's
happen
easy.
to me.
Exactly, exactly, and I think with as good as the remake is, I think it goes a little bit too on the nose with certain things. Like, you want it to be left up to your imagination at certain times. It's a little scarier and effective that way. And I understand that, like, real life isn't always as plain as good and evil. Like, there are morally gray areas with everybody, but I feel like with this type of story, it works better as a good and evil type thing. Like, with the remake with Nick Nolte, it's like, yeah, he's a bad dude. He kind of deserves kind of what's happening to him in a way. Whereas this, you don't want, the main character to have anything bad happen to him at that point. You want him to be able to kind of solve this and put Max away. I don't know. I think this one definitely works better in the long run as far as the film goes.
I think it's more succinct.
Yeah.
I will say, though, that something that I did enjoy about the remake is that I enjoyed the character development in the remake a little bit more than I enjoyed it in this one. So I do think that the original Cape Fear struggles just a teeny bit with we have this Leave It to Beaver family. Everything is perfect. Everything is happy go lucky. I would like to know a little bit more about Nancy. I would like to know a little bit more about Peggy. I would like to feel a little bit deeper for these characters in order for me to connect with them further. On the other hand, when I don't know a lot about them, it again makes me feel like it could happen to me.
Yeah,
If
true.
I'm creating their backstory in my head, that means I can put myself into that position, and that's also terrifying.
Yeah, and it also kind of, like you said, with the Leave It to Beaver, it kind of preserves the innocence of the characters as well, because you don't know much about them other than just being like a perfect, 60s family at that point. Where, like, yeah, you do get a little bit more, backstory or more character development with those characters in the remake. I think it kind of helps with this one not knowing as much, because the real main characters you're following are, the main character of what's his name, the main character, the lawyer. Sam.
Sam Bowden.
Yeah, with Sam and Max, you're mainly following these 2. I mean, it's a story of those 2. You do have his
Yes.
family involved in there, but you're mainly just focusing on those 2 throughout the movie. Where with the remake, you are focusing a little bit more on the daughter and the
Well,
mom a little bit
completely on
more.
the daughter. She
Yeah,
has both
completely
the
on the
first
daughter.
she both the
Yeah.
first and the last moments in the film. It's more of a telling of how she is dealing with her parents' struggling relationship and coming to age as a prepubescent teen, or, starting to go through puberty. I mean, there's a lot of that in the remake. I think it was an interesting movie to remake, and I always think that one of my favorite things to talk about when it comes to remakes is the movie Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. Have you seen that?
Okay. Yeah,
So
a while ago.
okay. So, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels was a remake of a movie called Bedtime Stories that had, Marlon Brando and somebody else in it whose name is escaping me. And then there was a remake of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels just maybe 5 or 10 years ago with Anne Hathaway and some other girl. They did a gender swap.
Yeah.
When Frank Oz was making Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, somebody asked him, "Well, the Bedtime Stories was like a huge flop. That movie was horrible. Nobody liked it. It was just trash." And everybody was like, "Well, why are you remaking a movie that is trash?" And his response to that was, "You wouldn't want to remake a movie that's good. Like, you don't need to remake a movie that's good."
We still
And
have that
that's why
argument today, to this day.
And that's why Dirty Rotten Scoundrels worked so extremely well, and why that movie is a classic still to this day, because he took a great plot and he made it a good movie. And that's also why the remake of the remake was trash, because you don't need to remake a good movie. And those 3 movies explain remakes to me. Like, that is the explanation of remakes. And so it was very bizarre to me that Scorsese did decide to remake such an incredible film that standalone is amazing, and his artistic choices in it, I think, were also very weird. I think if you look at the 2 movies separately, they're both really great films. I don't like thinking about Scorsese's version as a remake, because I feel like it's different enough, even though it has the music, even though it has the same general plot. I just want it to be a standalone, you know?
And that's funny that you say that, because I kind of was thinking the same thing. I kind of think of it as its own kind of standalone, even though it shares the same title, kind of same story. It does feel like its own standalone movie. There's just enough different with it to
Yeah,
kind of separate it. Whereas,
absolutely.
like, I think that would kind of help with how we were talking about making like a modern day retelling. I feel like you
Yeah.
could have enough different things in there as long as it's well written to differentiate it from the Scorsese and also this one. I feel like there's a lot of different things you can do, especially nowadays, as long as it's well written. That's the most important part of it.
Absolutely. And I mean, this is now a classic tale. It's the uh, how do I outsmart the person who's outsmarting me kind of tale.
Yeah.
And we see that in lots and lots of different places. So it definitely is ripe. I understand why it has been ripped off in so many movies and TV shows. I understand why Scorsese wanted to remake it, because it's absolutely incredible. And for me, I think that the original Cape Fear is probably up there in my favorite maybe 50 films of all time. It's up pretty high for me in movies that I truly, truly love.
Yeah, I mean, this was the first time I actually saw the original version of it, and I immediately after watching it put it in my Amazon cart, like the Blu-ray, because I want to buy it, I want to own it, I want to watch it again. That's how much I enjoyed this. Like it really, blew me away on how great this was. Like from the directing down to the story and just the acting in general throughout the whole thing. I feel like it was a perfect movie. I feel like it was solid the whole way around. I didn't and that like I mentioned going back to what I was saying before, it had me feeling these emotions for these characters throughout the whole way. It had me like angry at certain points, like why aren't you doing this type thing, and that's how you know it was effective. And all the way down to the very ending, it was so satisfying to not give him what he wanted by giving him an easy death, just put him back in prison where he belongs. I feel like it was the perfect movie.
Yeah, I would completely agree with you. So on my channel, I like to rate movies out of 7 thumbs up.
Okay.
So how many thumbs up would you give this movie?
I hate to be that dude, but I'm gonna give it 7. I'm gonna give all of it.
Yes,
It
I
was
love
perfect.
that.
I loved it.
I I also would give the 7 thumbs up. I think it's absolutely stunning. I think it becomes creepier each time you watch it. I think you pick up on more and more things every time that you watch it. It's hard to criticize it in any single way. Other than that, I was uncomfortable when I watched it, which is really a compliment.
Yeah, that exactly, and I feel like it's even harder because you know how we are. We were just talking about Terrifier. It's so easy to be,
Gore.
desensitized to
Yeah.
everything against gore or just, horror movies in general, just being scared. It says a lot about a movie from the '60s to watching it now for the first time to actually give me that sense of kind of, tension and, a little bit creeped out by these characters. Whereas like some other movies around that time weren't doing the same thing. Even like the Universal monster movies don't give you those type of like creepiness and scary factor, or even Psycho for that, like I mentioned earlier at the beginning. This movie was just so effective in what it did. It did it perfectly. It just, for that old of a movie to be doing that to me now, it shows how much it stands the test of time.
So, now that you have seen this, are you surprised that it's the same director as Happy Birthday to Me?
I am. I'm not gonna lie, I am, because this movie just seems like it was just brilliantly executed, not just from like a writing and acting standpoint, but from a directing standpoint as well. And as much as I liked Happy Birthday to Me, I feel like the directing and everything on that was a little messy here and there compared to this, where it just seems like it was just perfect all around.
I don't know, there wasn't a single shish kebab scene in this, so I
You
feel
need the
like
shish
it
kebab
missed
scene.
out on a little something, a little
You
something.
coulda had Max, like, just chilling while he was, watching everybody, like, on the pier. He could have been just eating
Eating
a
a
shish
shish
kebab
kebab.
on the pier, watching the daughter or something.
So stupid, that's so stupid. Well, thank you so much, Wyatt, for coming and joining me to talk about this. Will you please tell everybody a little bit about what you do and where they can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. It was had a great time here. Also, thank you for being on my channel as well. You can find me over on YouTube and also wherever you get your podcasts at Cinema Trip Reviews. We run a very similar show to this. We break down movies, from anything from, the old classics to brand new movies that are coming out in theaters and pretty much everything in between. Kind of break them down very similar to how you do. Also have like give it a rated like a buy it, rent it, or miss it type thing. Usually have an episode come out once a week.
Great. Yeah, everybody should absolutely go check out what you're doing. It's incredible. And I
Thank you.
absolutely love working with you. And obviously, I love what you're doing because you and I are doing very similar things. So I
Yeah.
enjoy that very, very much. Well, thank you again so much for joining me. And thank you all for watching. Bye.